transoceanic, transcontinental with electric or hydrogen powered. So what are the problems, the things that are limiting them, and what do they have to take a look at as they go into this market, these different vehicle providers? Well, the first is that they have to get them, as most of you in the drone industry know, there's a lot of regulations that have popped up. And in fact, the drone industry has helped push forward the regulation evolution, if you will, in the FAA here in the United States that will support the advanced air mobility, urban air mobility marketplace. But that's still in the United States, in particular with FAA, the regulations are being pushed. You're trying to fit this new market into the existing regulation space. And so the FAA is not quick to re-regulate or come up with new regulations. It takes a long time. So that's holding up things a little bit. In the EU, it's a little bit better. The EASA has come up with actual regulations focused on the advanced air mobility market, and they're trying to allow the providers of the vehicles to build out their vehicles, and then they're focusing in on them. The FAA is looking at some pilot programs to see how to operate the vehicles and how to come up with the right regulations or waivers to regulations, given that the vehicles can perform. The other big part of this, obviously, is safety. Safety for the vehicles, safety for the operations of the vehicles, et cetera, and that ties into the regulations that the FAA is looking at. However, it really is more than that. It's more, do you feel comfortable stepping into some little vehicle that has two other people and a pilot in it, or maybe no pilot in the future, and being transported above Manhattan skyline or down the river and then landing someplace else, all without you ever thinking about it? Additionally, when you tell people, hey, we're going to have a bunch of hydrogen in our airplanes, what do you think about? You think about the Hindenburg and about this huge explosion. And so there's a lot of public opinion that comes with that safety aspect, right? So public opinion does matter, and that's something that a lot of the companies are going out to explain themselves, explain the benefits of what the vehicles can give them. And so that's a big push, but it's something new. And then finally, there's the noise. Uber Elevate supposed that they were going to replace most of their Uber vehicles with these air taxis and they were going to supplement them. So you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, in a metropolitan area flying overhead. If you've ever been around a heliport and you've heard helicopters, everybody knows that they're annoying. And a lot of people will automatically call and say, there's a helicopter flying too low or something like that. Heck, I got it when I was flying jets. When I was flying at 10,000 feet, sometimes you get noise complaints. But these vehicles are really taking into account that, one, they don't have a jet engine that is the primary propulsor for the vehicle, as you might see in some turbo generated helicopters or something like that, or aircraft. And so it is fairly, the propulsion method is a little bit quieter. Sometimes the rotors themselves, if you put 8 different rotors, even though they're small discs together, you still get a fair amount of noise. And so they're actually going through right now a lot of tests. The NASA AAM project is doing noise measurements for a lot of the current vehicles that are going on into the marketplace. So that is a big push for these vehicles. For the market itself, and me, I'm looking at and trying to help people get into the market. And in my MBA, they said, so what is it that makes a company successful? And it was always location, location, location. Well, this is the location that you imagine advanced air mobility being in. And so it's not quite as simple as location for an airline vehicle. So we're looking at 5 different areas that are really important to take into account for this new evolving business and market. Most markets that are established will have to have 3 things. They'll have to have the finances and the money to operate. That's the oil that makes their company go. You have money in, you have money out, and you have to have money continually flowing. So you need the financial strength. You also need a market. You have to have something to be pulling for some product, and you have to have the product for that market. So those are the three big that we see. But when you're talking about an evolving and a new market space, you need to think about the strategies that you're employing. When do you and what do you want to enter into the market? There's a bunch of different ways. For instance, in urban air mobility, you could go into the racing market. There's a whole new sub market that's making racing vehicles, sort of like you have out in Reno, Nevada for the air races. They're making little electrified single seat sort of motocross in the air. And that's going to be exciting. That may push a little bit of the public acceptance for these vehicles. So there's this strategy. The strategy also is, when do you change to expand your market, right? So there's a lot of different complexities in that. And then there's these intangibles. Everybody has a sweep up, and in the intangibles, I put the skill set that you need at different levels of maturity for your product. So at the beginning, you're going to need a lot of engineers that are very smart on very unique and interesting aspects. So in this market in particular, the manpower is finding that you need people that are smart on batteries and chemistries for batteries and electromagnets and electromagnetic electric motors and helicopter aerodynamics and I don't know, all sorts of different pieces to it. You might also, as you start to develop and get ready to manufacture, you're going to transition from the number of engineers you have in your company to the number of actual technicians that are putting it together and selling it. In the C-suite, you're going to have people that are smart on the technologies, as well as smart on being businessmen and possibly international businesses. How do you get certification for your vehicles? All of that comes in the intangibles. The last thing that I would say is that there are pieces around the market that have to evolve and be put into place. So you need places to land these vehicles, particularly in the urban areas. So vertiports and things like that are being designed and regulated, and that is ongoing. You have to have the ability to communicate, particularly as you start thinking about the numbers and the flow of the airspace. So the idea of 5G communications and the ability to communicate inter aircraft and do the beyond visual line of sight, if you're talking about drones or unpiloted vehicles, that has to be put into place. There's the idea of storage for hydrogen. If you're going to store hydrogen, the ability to pump a lot of amps of electrical power into charging stations for fairly large battery banks, if you're going to create the rapid charging capability that you need to really sustain operations at a pace that they would like to. So there's a lot of other things that are going to come along with this, and it's an exciting time. They're breaking in. Most of the established companies are looking to be flying by 2024, and that's not too far off. They're really making some good progress with that, particularly in Europe. Volocopter is a company there that is looking to be in the Paris Olympics and moving the athletes back and forth from outlying Olympic villages. So that will be an interesting thing to see if it really happens. China is making a lot of really hard work. They're going through a lot with a company called EHang, and that is moving forward in small steps, but they may be ready by 2024 as well. So that's about all I wanted. If anyone has any questions, I'm all ears.
Well, that was fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, so I know a lot of us here may have that need for speed. I have to say, the whole Reno air races and, going into that direction, that's awesome. That is a public perception that I hadn't even considered. And so that's just something new and exciting.
Yeah.
Sounds dangerous too, doesn't it? It's like, what? Like either you do it or you don't. Like you're
That's
in
right.
or you're out, literally out. But yeah, I just too want to say, as a mother and as a woman that's always worked with kids and youth, that like, that's awesome that, we have the man, the father of the woman that's the first Blue Angel. Like that's iconic, like it's taken this long, but it happened. And so for you as a father, that just really warms my heart. That's the kind of good news that we need to hear on a daily basis, that, amidst everything that's going on in our country and in the world and all that's going on, there's so much silver lining. There's so many good news, and people are still moving forward regardless.
Thanks a lot, Kim. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
I also think about those Olympic, when you said, for the Olympics, like having them go in, I'm like, wow, that would take a lot of trust. Like, you show up and, like you've never been in one of these, and they worked hard all their life, and then they're going to get into this vehicle that's going to fly them somewhere. That's pretty iconic.
Yeah, that's going to be a big deal. And so we'll see how much of that actually happens. There's also a group that's looking at an expo, the World Expo, and I'm trying to remember where that is. I think it's in Japan. So there's a group that is looking to partner with them to move different folks around that venue in Osaka. And so that will be interesting to see how that is pulled off. That's in the 2025 timeframe, I think.
Yeah, that's just around the corner, like you said.
I know,
just
that's
around
right.
the corner. I mean, we're at 2022, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, and a lot of people haven't heard very much about the development of these vehicles. And so when all of a sudden you hear that they're FAA compliant or certified in 2024, they're like, well, what did they do? What type of development did they do? Because all of these companies are being fairly insular about their development, because they want to be the first one in. They want to be the Model A, right?
That's right. That's right.
They want to grab the market and go with it. So you're not hearing very much about them, which is unfortunate in my mind. I think that they should be a little bit more open and generate the public excitement that could be out there. I really believe that. In fact, I suggested, there was that public acceptance piece. I suggested that, hey, what if you went to, let's say, the TV show 9/11, which is set in the LA area. And what if you said there was this horrible crash, there's a ton of traffic as usual, and you need to get this person to a hospital right now. And there happens to be a field where one of these new vehicles are doing some test flights. They're just going up and down. And you say, hey, wait, can you take this guy to the hospital for us? Well, yeah, sure, we could. Sure, let's go do it. Well, screw the regulations, we'll go. And they take them off, and they, it's a big, huge, great, feel-good story. Well, you see a lot of that type of stuff on television anyway. It's all science fiction, but this isn't. And it could be really showing the utility of these vehicles, probably some of the first best utilities of these vehicles right now to the public. And so I hope that there's something like that comes on.
It inspires the vision, right? It inspires the vision. I mean, that's how all of us got into what we got into, is we saw something, because we're still, the pioneers of the industry, and we saw something, even though now, when I first saw and heard a story that I heard, about thermal imaging that really inspired me, was that light bulb moment. 2 years later, I talked to John McBride, and what the guy said to me that originally inspired me wasn't even possible. But it got me in, and that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah. Hey, Vic, you have your hand up.
Vic, I see your hand up. Yeah.
I do. Question for you. Regulation, of course. They just changed the DAC to the ACC, AAAC, Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee. Mostly, or not mostly, but a big part of it is because of advanced air mobility.
Yep.
And they just this last time tasked gave us a tasking of figuring out the AAC or the AAM regulations. How quickly do you think the FAA can move to make this actually regulatorily possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, on our advisory panel, I have an expert in this area that he has spoken to over the past 2 years, maybe. And I've listened to him, and so I have some ideas. The FAA is making some inroads in this area. I will say, in my estimation, I think that there will be vehicles ready to fly before there's the full regulations, but I think they will make pockets, as I said, pilot programs. In Florida, for instance, they have the FAA has a test facility, I'll call it, that they run out of Daytona Beach, right near Embry, and they are looking at and working with some of the newer companies coming in. Lilium's one, I think Eve is another one that is going into South Florida, and they're going to set up particular test run areas where they open up the aperture of their existing regulations. They will still have to meet some of the standing regulations for operations, for safety of operations, for pilot safety, for aircraft movement safety. You can't fly over a large population density, things like a football stadium or something like that that's full. But you will be able to fly, and they'll be able to move in those areas. They'll find out what's working and what's not. In Dallas, they've already started some drone work, right, to understand how you move these smaller vehicles in and among the existing traffic patterns that are there, and don't disrupt the large carriers that are going in and out of the big international airports. So there is work ongoing that the FAA is trying to make and understand the impact of multiple small vehicles in urban areas. I think it's easier for them to understand the regional stuff. I mean, it's just a new aircraft with a different propulsion technique. And so they are looking at doing some certification of the propulsion, like the engines, if you will, so that they can be brought into all and backfitted into all sorts of different aircraft to allow them to be more economically viable going into these smaller airports that all of the larger carriers, because they are flying large airplanes, don't go into anymore. And so you have this desert of mobility out in the middle of the country, where you really need some amount of mobility, aviation mobility. Otherwise, you're jumping in a car for 5 hours. So long story there. I truly believe that 24 is a little bit early for total certification of the total market. I would bet that it's closer to the end of the century, closer to 2030.
Yeah, I hear 2030 mostly as well. And that would be, I
Okay.
think that's realistic, if not optimistically realistic.
And that's in
we'll
the
see.
United States.
Right.
That's in the United States, right? So you may see Europe and small parts of Europe expand a little bit faster.
Well, do you see ICAO getting involved? So it's more of a worldwide certification?
That's funny. I put that on my LinkedIn just recently. Yeah, ICAO should be getting involved, absolutely, because you have all these different. You have CCA, you have the FAA, you have China, you have Japan. All of those different entities are coming up with different ways to regulate this, and I think that that's wrong. I think that you're going to have real problems for the carriers, for the folks that are building these, to adjust to each of those regulations. And so there's got to be this supernumerary that looks at all of it. So I hope that ICAO gets involved, but I don't know that they have yet. They haven't stepped into it yet.
So Bill, who's flying the drones? I mean, flying the air mobility, who are these people? Are they people that are certified? Are they people that are engineers?
Yeah.
Is it an opportunity for, a commoner like myself to fly people around at the Olympics?
Absolutely. I would say yes. There's, from what I've seen, there's a there are not, there is no one yet that has been certified for autonomous or pilotless type of mobility except in China. EHang has demonstrated pilotless, very short trips using a ground station that is watching the air picture, if you will, and driving the vehicles around. Wisk, which is a small company that grew out of a venture between Boeing and Kitty Hawk. Wisk is attempting to be totally autonomous with its vehicle, but it is not expecting to go into operation until probably after 2030 as well. They're waiting, and they will let the market sort of open up first. So is there going to be anybody on the ground flying these like a drone operator? Not in the near future. I would hope that autonomy and the communication infrastructure will be in place well enough by 2030 or so that it occurs. I think it's going to be piloted vehicles first, and piloted multicopters, 4-seaters, a pilot and 3 passengers in it. And there are folks that are standing up training facilities for that type of piloting. And there's actual avionics suppliers that are looking at developing very intuitive, easy to run, almost touchscreen type of flight controls for these vehicles. So I see CAE getting involved in the development of the training for these vehicles. I've heard they are working with Beta Technologies, which is they're building a vehicle that is a transition vehicle. It can fly straight and level, but then when it gets to a location, the vertical rotors come into play, and then you have to land and take off vertically if necessary. They can actually land in a conventional style as well. But the training is going to be first for pilots, and then it will be for drone operators. Now, I talked about the logistics as well, though. That is pure and simple, the drone technology that is already there being converted into these sustainable electric or hydrogen powered type of vehicles, and allowing that to grow in its payload capacity. So that is part of advanced air mobility and is being looked at in a bunch of different ways.
Awesome.
Do you feel that the training will be aircraft specific?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, that's what I am seeing. And I think what's going to happen, this is just looking back, we use in Air Advisory, we point out that in the early 1900s, there were over 2,000 car manufacturers, people that said they were going to manufacture cars. 2,000. There's about 230, 250 advanced air mobility, different styles of vehicles being produced or under production, under maturation right now. So from 2000, you went down to maybe across the globe now, you have probably less than 100 car manufacturers, right? So you can easily, and the standardization of the car is fairly consistent. You might have a right-handed or left-handed driving position, but in general, it has 4 wheels, and you turn left, you turn right, the wheels turn, and all of that, it's the same. And you start it up the same, and you shift the gears, and all that's the same. So getting a license for a car means you can drive any car, really, right? To your point, as we have these 200 different manufacturers start to take the marketplace, the market is going to drive a consolidation, and you're going to start to see various styles of vehicles show up. There's going to be multi-copters, there's going to be short takeoff and landing vehicles, and there's going to be conventional vehicles, in my opinion. And you're going to be able to get pilot's license for those 3 styles. And then you're going to be able to get the unmanned area vehicle licensing that you currently are, that we're working through that process as the FAA gets that put together. But I think that that's the way that it's going to come down to. Until then, you're going to have special certification for that particular vehicle, and it's going to be very, very specific, I believe. And that's going to probably take 10 years to flesh out at least.
Question?
Yes.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Hi. I live in the New York City area. I've been a light aircraft pilot since 1980, so I have a lot of experience flying around the New York area.
Yeah.
Currently, helicopters, as I'm sure you know, are not the environment for helicopter operators in New York City area is pretty poor at the moment. There's
Yeah.
been a few high, accidents that were
High
published,
visibility.
right, exactly. Thank you. And there's been calls to eliminate helicopter traffic over New York City. Also, having been a pilot for so many years, I know the FAA, excuse me, is very slow to adopt change.
Yep.
And they've been very slow to roll out their own technology. Many times they made projections that were way, way off. And also, I believe you said in the beginning of your presentation, which I enjoyed, thank you, that you were a pilot. Obviously, you're going to have some sort of identification system for all these aircraft,
Yep.
which if you're talking about thousands of them flying around, I'm not sure how that's going to integrate into the current air traffic situation, especially in a market like New York. Certainly secondary or tertiary markets would be easier to start with than large cities.
Yep.
But that's what I'm
Great
curious about, how
observations
they're
there.
going to do that.
No, great observations. I actually wrote an article for the ATC Association that'll be published next month, I think, or over the summer, their summer edition. I looked into, and one of the points that they talk about is this identification and the scheme that they use right now for identification. There was a fairly large, a large research project that defined a way to do that in a urban environment where you have a set of alphanumerics and you drop one off when it lands, and it's automatically rescheduled to another taking off, and they figured out, they showed that you could do it for a fairly robust system. And this was done through some university. I can't remember the name of it, but that you may look that up on the web to see something about that. I can't remember the name of it, but it was to your point exactly, that they have investigated that and they've shown some of the utility. Now, actually implementing it, how would you implement it in the system that they have now? You'd have to upgrade it so that you could do these on flight or on demand calls for registrations, for identification registrations.
Right.
Your point about those high visibility accidents in the New York City area is absolutely something that is being taken into account. So most of the work that I see happening is happening out in the LA area. Joby has married up with the LA City Air Transit, I think, or transit system, and they're working out what is it that you'll allow and where will you allow it, those type of things. Another company, I think it's Whisk, which is autonomous, is looking at Long Beach and talking to them about if you had unpiloted people or vehicles going around, what would you do, and where would that be allowable, and how would you integrate it, etc. I think that the first places, though, that are going to do it is someplace like Sao Paulo, down in Brazil, which is the highest helicopter utilization area in the world. They have a huge helicopter transport system in place now, and just the idea of getting rid of some of the noise will be a push to drive it down there. And so you see Embraer's Eve has a big footprint or buy that they've sold down there for their vehicle, which isn't even been shown as flying yet. But some other of the manufacturers are also going after the Brazilian market.
Now, the aircraft that you're talking about, they're going to be totally autonomous?
No, at the beginning they're not. So somebody like Joby, which is one of the front runners right now, really the front runner, I would say. Joby is going to be a piloted airplane with 3 passengers, but that makes it very economically inefficient because you're not getting any money for that one quarter of your payload. So hopefully that's why the drive to autonomy is really being pushed, and they're hoping and they're expecting to be able to go autonomous by the next decade, by the 2030s.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where they can get the radio spectrum to
Yep, agreed.
control all that.
Noel, when they're talking about autonomy, a lot of it is by autonomy on board the vehicle. So it's not a ground controlled autonomy. This is true autonomy, where they have the brains in there that has the ability and the sensor systems that are going to be able to, you tell it where you want it to fly, and it's going to be able to navigate as if there was a true pilot on board. So you're going to have artificial intelligence driving the vehicle, and that's what they expect. That's what Wisk expects.
Right, but you still need to avoid collisions with other aircraft, so they're going to have to communicate in some manner, like a MODES type system or something like that.
Yeah, you would hope. unless I mean, you have light support aircraft out there that don't have any radios in it or ADS-B, and they're flying around. They're allowed to fly around in VFR because they can see it. So these vehicles may have IR systems. Kim, you talked about thermal imaging. They may have that. They may have ways on board, sensor systems on board that are fairly small. My phone has a camera on board that's pretty high resolution. You can put 15 of these around a vehicle and then stitch it together, and you have a full six DOF understanding of the world around you, at least a visual understanding, right? You start going into clouds or IFR, that's a problem. So you have LiDAR, you have radar that's being used on ground vehicles to allow them autonomous operations. So I'm not sure that there's this huge bandwidth problem. I think it's smart to do for safety, particularly in IFR. You have to have that. But I agree with you. I know from the military is being constrained more and more by their spectrum. And so I see it. And again, for my ATC article, I found some of their work in ADS and some of their beyond visual line of sight type of communications work. They are trying to find ways to embed themselves in the current system and do spectrum share. DARPA has done some work on that. So there's other areas out there. And as some people would like to say, it's only engineering when you get to that. That's true. You can engineer it, but you also have to implement it, and it has to be affordable to implement.
Bill,
Is there,
what do you foresee as maybe like the height regulations? Are they going to be able to fly up with all the big boys? And also, like for us drone pilots, like, is there going to be technology like cameras on it and stuff like that, since you're kind of mixing, the autonomous flight with the manned flight? Is there going to be some cool, are they foreseeing some cool like technologies on it that we can relate to?
Yeah, well, I think I'll take that last part of the question first, is that, yes, I do believe that they will have some amount of sensor systems that will allow them to onboard recognize collision, as Richard was talking about. And they will have, the ideal is that they will have an AI at a level that is beyond just being able to tell that it's a cat or a dog. It will actually have a little bit more general autonomy or general artificial intelligence, in the sense that it can think much more like a human and make multiple decisions in a complex environment, in a dynamic environment, given all the information that it gets on board organically. So as opposed to having to have a human sitting down like you do on a drone, which you might have a video display of what's outside and in the front of the cockpit, or as if you were sitting in a seat. you are flying around like that, I think that that will be tried to be transplanted on board. Could they make it as easy as driving a car so that one of the passengers can do something? I think that that would be wrong to do, because I think you don't know to a good degree what the motivations of the passengers will be. You know, what do they want to get there faster? Do they want to land right here, right now? All that stuff. Additionally, and I didn't mention this before, another big part of all of this, to Richard's point on communications, is cybersecurity. Having the ability to insulate that AI's brain and make sure that there isn't a virus that gets in there that causes it to become a human missile or a multi-human missile is going to be really, really important, right?
Yes, yeah.
And what about
You-
like flight? Is it, you feel like, I mean, are you seeing that it's gonna be like flying below 10,000? Is it not gonna be able to go over like, say, 2,000? Like, and then you got the drone space, so we're up to 400. Is there a sweet spot in there that they're looking at?
Yes, I would say one, that they're going to have to be as much as possible outside the micro weather that's in between all of the buildings when you're talking about an urban environment. When you're talking about, and so they'll have to be up, I think, someplace between 10,000 and 400, you know, someplace in there. I think that that's going to be their transit area. They're going to have to carve out areas that they have talked about having dynamic routing, where they say, I want to go up to this, and they plug it into the ATC system. It automatically does the deconfliction of flight patterns, and either by altitude or by, you know, geographic waypoint positioning, as well as carving out the wedding cake for, you know, the larger airports, et cetera. So you have to work all around that, right? So they are looking at various ways to do that. And that's where the pilot programs I was talking about, I think the FAA will be really intent on figuring out what are the actual airspaces that have to be carved out, how dynamic does that have to be, and what and how many are there going to be. I think that's their big parts. The regional and commercial air stuff is simply, as I said, that's retrofitting in general, retrofitting current aircraft for the ability to fly just like a current commercial aircraft. In general, they will be able to fly higher, but they may not want to, because then you have to add on oxygen equipment and all of that as you go above 10,000 feet. Whereas if you don't, and remember, we fly in general aviation now at those altitudes to preserve fuel, right? You're getting a lot more economy of your fuel when you go up higher. But with a battery, you don't get any more economy when you go up. In fact, you lose it because you're using all your power to get up to altitude. So if they stay down at 4,000 AGL and fly from regional airport to regional airport, that's probably okay. Even IFR, depending on the terrain that they have to navigate, right? So those are the.
Sounds like Star Wars. Sounds like
Yeah.
Star Wars. I'm never going to be able to watch Star Wars again without thinking I am part of this.
That's
I'm
right.
part of this. It's like it just
Yeah.
reminds me of, like, you know, not Return of the Jedi. It was the one before Phantom Menace. It was when he switched over and found out that his father was Darth Vader.
Yeah,
Which one is
right.
that, you guys? Right? Like, and they're jumping from, you know, these low altitude, like kind of cool looking in between, you know, drones and planes, and they're jumping out of it and going from place to place. Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
so cool because it's happening.
It's happening. Yeah, that's what got me excited about coming into this and talking about this. My enthusiasm is both for the sustainability of it, but also it is the first time that aviation has changed in 50 years since the Whipple
Wow.
engine came in. If you think about it, it is really that much of a change, going from propellers to jet engines.
Well, perhaps some of the same rules that apply to light sport aircraft and experimental aircraft could be adapted here.
Oh, I think so. I think you're absolutely right. The way that the FAA instituted the light support aircraft in their sort of mentality, if you will, in their architecture, I see this being part of that, Greg. That's a great point, and it's a great first step, right? Until you get much more confidence in what is needed to pilot it or what is needed to operate it. I think you're right.
Awesome. Wow. So much great information, a lot of comments coming in, and now we're on to Vic's Blade Runner, and it's our future, and it's
Yeah, it's
amazing
cool.
technology, and it just extremely fascinating, and it's exciting to be on that cutting edge of what the future is holding. And so
So
And
Kim,
Bill,
I have
your
to,
enthusiasm and passion is off the chart. So, I
thanks.
mean, we're all, a lot of us are in, as drone pilots and stuff, but when you come on, I mean, what's great is that, I can only speak for myself, but, we can relate to what you're saying. You're not talking over our head. You have so much experience that it would be easy to talk over our head, but
Ah.
your passion, is so educating. And I just want to thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
letting me do this. I do have to say that my
you.
son
yeah.
is a drone pilot himself with the
Woohoo.
Navy. He's an he's an EOD officer, and they use very small drones in their work. So,
In their work.
Work.
yeah, their work. Yeah, exactly.
In their work.
Wow.
And that's all he can say, or he'll have to kill us.
That's right. That's right.
Well, we just thank you so, so much for coming and sharing all this great knowledge with us today and your passion. And if there's a way that somebody could reach out to you if they had questions, if it's possible, could you put your email in
Yeah.
there? And that way
I'll
if
put that in the
somebody
chat.
wanted to-
Absolutely.
That would be wonderful, because I know there's still a lot of conversation still going on, a lot of curiosity about the future and what the AAM is holding. And my thing is telling me it's 10 a.m. And
It's 10 a.m. Yeah.
so
Time for
really
us to fly.
yes, it does. So I do have one quick announcement. I want to remind you that this week is the last time to be able to register for the Autel presentation and training workshop with John McBride. Oh, yes. So that's coming up this weekend. And then also SMG is offering a free 107 seat for their online training if you have signed up for that Women in Drones Autel workshop. Wow, how awesome is that? So again, I'm going to put that link in there because Jennifer.
You're on mute, Desi.
Desi, you went to mute.
Of all the people, Desi's on mute.
Oh, man.
That never happens.
Oh, only my husband does that, but right. So I don't know how much of that you got, but I did post a offer that SMG did for the 107 class if you've signed up for the Autel workshop coming up this weekend. And I hope to see you there in Utah. Super excited. With that, I want to do a shout out again to Bill, and thank you so much for joining us on the Women in Drones Coffee Connection. It was fantastic. Looking forward to the future.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody, have a great week.
We'll see you next week.
See
Stay
you
safe,
next week.
everyone.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Have a great week.
That kind of wraps it up.